That would be wonderful. So how would you say your upbringing shaped your view of the world?
I mean, I did write some notes here. Um, and some of that I already went over in terms of, in particular, my dad's sort of political and sort of religious view certainly influenced me. Um, I would say also that, my dad was always very much outspoken about U.S. imperialism, U.S. Conduct or against Mexico, its loss of its territories. All of those things were part of my upbringing when I was growing up. Never quite understood it at first, right? It was always quite confusing because I mean, I thought, I'm an American, I'm born here, and yet here I have a an immigrant father from Mexico telling me stories that I don't see them necessarily as clearly in the books that I'm reading. It's not until college that I really sort of start putting things together, to understand sort of where he was coming from. But certainly, my dad was very critical of the United States, very critical in terms of its treatment towards Latin America, its treatment against Mexicans. My dad was constantly talking and about sort of the discrimination, the second class status of Mexican Americans in this country, the importance of and the reason why I needed to get to college, go to school. I mean, so all of that was very much a part of my upbringing, and I took it to heart. I mean, I started sort of my consciousness, my sense of self really developed probably around 1979, is when I recall really keying into watching the news, for example. My dad was always somebody who was always screaming at the television set, right? I always ignored him, but around 1979, it becomes important, and that was during the hostage crisis in Iran, and it was that whole year of watching the news coverage, and then watching it with my dad, sort of talking about it, and then really being critical about sort of US policy towards Iran and all this kind of stuff is like, so I'm getting sort of this sense that I can be critical about my own country. So that was really, eye-opening, I guess,
Yeah.
to a certain degree. So I got that sense from him that I can be critical of these things and speak out about them. And I think those are the things that and then of course then being proud of my who I am. I think I really early on got a sense of who I was. And I knew right away that I was different, right? And I'm talking about my brothers and I. This is a whole different upbringing. And then we're growing up in an African American community, where we were perceived um in a confused way, because you had folks you had folks at school, young people, students, fellow friends, and others who were calling us, terrible things. So we were called, for example, white boys, what are some other honkies. And then we would say, yeah, but we're not white. Then what the hell are you? We're Mexican. Oh, then you're beaners, you're wetbacks. So we
Oh,
would get hit on both.
no.
And I guess because we're so light skinned that we for many African Americans, they were confused as to what the hell we were. So we were getting it from both ends. And it was confusing for us,
I'm so sorry.
it was fascinating is there were many more colorful names in Spanish than for as a result of our Mexican identity than there were for being white. So it's just very fascinating. So anyway, so that so I would say that that's how my identity was shaped from all these experiences. And of course I had, living in my neighborhood, I had African American friends. So I was both afraid of a lot of the gang violence that was going on. Every single time I would leave the house, it was always a kind of like a fear thing. And I think that that's what also motivated me to hurry up and get the hell out of our neighborhood, really go to college
Yeah.
and leave. It was just not easy, and my parents got discriminated. They were discriminated against, but but they were discriminated against by all sides and based on their immigrant status. I mean, my parents didn't speak English very well.
Wow.
And I mean, my dad just passed away
Oh,
over a year ago, and he, his English, and then my mom too. I mean, so my dad came over to the United States in 1950s, early mid 1950s, in his 30s, and my mom came over in her early 20s. But you know, we spoke only Spanish to them. But I
right.
think that in their interactions with the outside world, they were oftentimes, belittled as a result of their, their inability to speak English very well, and then immediately folks knew that they were immigrants, so then they'd get it again. So I think that
Wow.
all those things help sort of build my identity, my wanting to go to college, my wanting to get out of that neighborhood, and the college, and that basically education was going to be the only way for me to get the hell out. I saw how hard my parents worked, and I did not want to work that hard.
Yeah.
There's so for me, it was going to be education. So I hung in there.
Wow. I, s- I guess going off from that, what was it like being in higher education at that time, entering college? Um, have uh, do you have any memories of it, negative or positive?
You mean
Um,
as a student?
yes, well,
Well,
around when were you a student? Around what years would you say?
so let me see. So I entered undergraduate around 1983. So I was in college 1983 to about 1988, 89. So right through there. And I loved college. I loved the whole experience. I loved every bit of it. And mostly I love being away from home. I mean, I enjoyed my independence. I never wanted to go back to my parents' house. Look, my parents, lovely people, but holy cow, were they hard on us. And I relished being on my own, but it was hard too. All right, I didn't have the skills or right away, despite the fact that I went to Catholic school. I still was not prepared for the academic rigor. So I spent so much time on work in the library, way too much time than I should have, and so it kept me from joining and doing other things. But I did it. I was determined. I was, basically hard headed, and I was not going to let this thing beat me. So, so I learned. I mean, I learned. There were many things, many issues, I don't want to say deficiencies, but certainly things that were lacking. And one of them was um confidence, for example, in public speaking, standing up. I would stand up for myself. I mean, I joined Chicano organizations. I joined our equivalent of Mecha, which was El Congreso. I was in pre-law, for example. I was doing all these things, but taking standardized exams, I did horrible in horrible, horrible, horrible. You know, but I always excelled in the class. I always excelled with my professor. So, it's funny, but taking standardized exams, I always sucked at. Um, but anyway, but I made it through, uh, and even those skills that I learned at Santa Barbara, when I did my master's at the University of Washington in public administration. It was always a chore. I was still building on those skills. My public speaking ability, I started to work on it much more after my undergraduate. I just didn't know. I never took a course for example, in any of that, and that was always very difficult. And then after that, that's when I went to work. Really, after my master's, then my master's program in public administration was probably over like around 1983,
Mhm.
1993. I'm sorry, 1993. And
Wow.
then I went to work in politics.
Oh, you were in politics.
Oh yeah.
What what was that like? If
Well, my first job was when I finished the MPA. So we were living in Seattle. 1994 was the year that my daughter was born. I ended up working on a campaign for one of my fellow students. Her name was Maggie Fimia, and she ran for King County Council. And I volunteered, and when she won her campaign, I was hired. So that was my first job. So I was working for King County Council as a legislative aide, and I did that for only about a year. And because I learned how to drink coffee in Seattle. I learned to love coffee, that
Yeah.
really strong coffee, because I was having a lot of sleepless nights, and I was getting to work exhausted, and I could only handle about a year of that. And then we decided, my wife and I decided to go back to Los Angeles. So we left Seattle and came back to LA. I ended up I basically opened up the LA Times. When people still opened up newspapers, I opened up the LA Times and looked for work, found some political jobs. I joined another campaign for a school board, and that was Lucia Rivera. And then that was my introduction into LA politics. So I joined her campaign, and then as a result of that job, I ended up getting introduced to Javier Becerra. Now, if you know who Javier Becerra is, right? So, and I think, right, I've explained that. I believe I did when you
Yeah.
took my course. But Javier Becerra was the Attorney General, right?
Yes.
He was now tapped by Biden, and now he is running for the governor for the state of California. So he
Wow.
was a member of Congress when I was introduced to him. I applied for a job. He hired me, and I worked for him. Let me see. That probably would have been around 1996, 97, 98. And then that was it. 3 years of legislative work. I was an aide, a representative and then I was placed in East Los Angeles, right? And again, my
Hmm.
bilingual skills, all of that helped me out. I was doing much better in public speaking, so I was able to do a lot of more presentations, that type of stuff. I did a lot of writing in the office as well. Learned how to do a lot of that. And but after 3 years, that's when I decided to sort of leave that behind
Yeah.
and go get my PhD in history. And again, politics is tough, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, I just decided not to go that route, and just at that point, do something that I thought was going to be easier. Wasn't necessarily. So that's when I decided to apply for graduate school and start my PhD program. So in 1998, I started the PhD program, and I did it at UC Irvine.
Wow. Um, I suppose going back to the building off the political career, how would you say your experience in politics shaped your view of the world?
Well, I mean, so I really did get a chance to look at the legislative process, right? The public outreach, how politics is influenced, how you influence politics. The importance of political participation was certainly emphasized and reinforced. I loved it, but I ended up having other responsibilities. I mean, I would have kept going in that route. Probably, I probably would have gone to law school, but things sort of get, life has a way of just taking you in another direction. But I love politics, and I still do. And I guess this is why I'm still doing, the sort of political work. I'm still writing, right? I'm still getting
Yeah.
involved. But so so I learned the importance of democracy. I learned that Chicanos we need more people involved. We need more civic participation. But I certainly learned that in places like, let me see, his area included East Los Angeles. His area included parts of downtown Los Angeles, Eagle Rock. It was a big little congressional district.
Mhm.
There was a lot of Chicano participation, a lot of old school, established Mexican engagement. It wasn't like that in many other communities, right, where you had
Yeah.
newer folks getting involved. But definitely, I learned that Chicanos were rising in influence, in political influence, and I was kind of like in the middle of that, so it was kind of exciting.